Question. Hello Kim, thank you very much for your service, work and sharing. It resonates with me and I find it very beneficial and helpful to have confirmation from your part. I would say that I reached a balanced approach, being a mother and wife, but I'm still not clear what kind of work to engage in that will bring income and satisfaction in doing it, since it is not possible for me anymore to do a regular job within the system that I transcended. I would appreciate if you could provide some insight or guidance on that. Thank you again. Much love. Well, the question doesn't say what system it is you transcended. So I'll answer it in more general terms, because what I recognize for myself and many people I met on the spiritual path throughout these decades is that there comes a point where you realize, dang. Question. Hello Kim, thank you very much for your service, work and sharing. It resonates with me and I find it very beneficial and helpful to have confirmation from your part. I would say that I reached a balanced approach, being a mother and wife, but I'm still not clear what kind of work to engage in that will bring income and satisfaction in doing it, since it is not possible for me anymore to do a regular job within the system that I transcended. I would appreciate if you could provide some insight or guidance on that. Thank you again. Much love. Well, since the question doesn't say what system the person has transcended, I would answer it in more general terms, because over the decades, just based on my own experience and many other spiritual people, I can see that there comes a point as a spiritual person where you have what you can call an awakening, because you realize that so many of the things you were told when you were growing up, they either were wrong or they weren't the whole truth. So your whole outlook on life, your whole perspective on life starts to shift. And for many spiritual people, it means that the normal goals that people have in terms of career, engaging in a job, working in a corporate job for 40 years and then retiring with a pension, it's just not something that appeals to us anymore. We don't have a desire to do it, and we may also, in many cases, spiritual people feel that the whole system is wrong or artificial or anti-spiritual, and they just can't get themselves to engage in it. And so I understand this very much. And I, of course, can't really say that I'm a good example because I haven't followed that kind of a career path, and I haven't worked for the corporate world or anything like that. So I'm not one to tell people that this is a wrong view that they have. But the thought I will throw out there, which has come to me many times over the years, is that it's understandable that you have a spiritual awakening, you look at society in a different way, you look at jobs and careers in a different way, and you feel like this is just not something you can engage in. But what if this is meant to be a phase? Just a step on your path. Because what I see many times in spiritual people, and I can see it in myself also, is that because we have been brought up, especially if we've grown up in the West, we've been brought up with this view that you're supposed to get an education, you're supposed to get a job, you're supposed to work your way up in your career, and you're supposed to, of course, get married, have children, get a house in the suburbs and 2 cars, and spend 30 years paying off your mortgage. And this is what is the meaning of life, is basically what we're told growing up. So it's obvious that this is a very unbalanced view of life. It's very skewed towards the material side of life. So here we are, we're spiritual people, we always have questions as we're growing up, and all of a sudden we find a spiritual teaching. Now we realize there is a spiritual reality, And because we were brought up over here on this side, it's almost inevitable that when we do awaken to the spiritual side of life, we swing to the other side. And I've seen, of course, many people do this, that they, especially when people find a spiritual path when they're young, they want to throw themselves at spiritual studies, a spiritual movement. They want to withdraw from society, go into some kind of retreat setting, take these long courses on meditation or whatever you have. So for a time, people have to do this, And then what happens to many people is that after they have done this for some time, the pendulum starts swinging back. And my view of this, based on my own experience, is that it's understandable, as I said. We grow up in this very unbalanced, anti-spiritual, materialistic view of life. So we find the spiritual path and it's natural we swing. But we should really, in the long run, come to a point where we're not swinging anymore, because we found a balanced approach. And this, the question says here, I would say that I reached a balanced approach, being a mother and wife, but I'm still not clear about the work. So obviously there are also people who, when they're spiritual, they swing over. They can't have children. They don't want to have children. They don't want to be in a committed relationship. So if you have found balance in those areas, being a mother and wife, then I think you can also find balance in your work life. Because again, you can ask yourself a very simple question. Many spiritual people, what we believe is that the earth is moving into a better age. Some call it the golden age of Saint Germain. There are other names for it, but we are moving into a better age where there's going to be more awareness of everything. But sometimes as spiritual people, we have a unrealistic view of how that's going to happen. And we think that it is just going to happen by us doing spiritual activities. Like in my first spiritual movement, transcended meditation, people thought, and maybe they still do, that if we just meditate, this will change society automatically. In a second spiritual movement, the Summit Lighthouse, we thought if we just give these decrees and invoke the violet flame, that's going to change society. But I have come to realize that this is just not realistic, because what is going to change society is that people change their consciousness, right? And how are people going to change their consciousness? They're going to have to see examples of other people who have changed their consciousness. In other words, if you're a spiritual person, if you worked on yourself, changing your consciousness, you can be an example for others. But how are you going to be an example for others if you don't interact with others? So what I'm saying is that as part of this change into a golden age, it's obvious that the corporate world, careers, jobs are also going to change. But how are they going to change? They're going to change by spiritual people engaging in those areas of society and demonstrating that we reached a more balanced state of consciousness. And so what I'm saying is that I have come to realize over the years that in the Aquarian age, this old model that we, in order to be spiritual, we withdraw from society, is just outdated. This was a Piscean age idea. Many people needed to withdraw from society. And it's actually very unfortunate that many spiritual people in the modern democracies have been pulled into this, which often comes because they are exposed to a spiritual guru or teaching that originated in India, where they still have this attitude. And so so I think what we need to do as spiritual people in the modern world is we need to transcend that. We need to not flip from the materialistic unbalanced approach to the spiritually unbalanced approach. And we need to find some middle way there where we can realize that in the Aquarian age, the goal is that spirituality becomes part of our everyday life or rather that our everyday life becomes spiritual, however you want to put it. But we are meant in the Aquarian age to see that all aspects of life can be made spiritual if we make them spiritual. And, you know, the only way that people are going to see that there's an alternative to the normal approach is to interact with people who are living that alternative, who are demonstrating it. And so I think it's quite possible for a spiritual person to engage in regular jobs, regular careers, and still be true to your spiritual worldview. And I think it's very beneficial that people do this. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm not, you know, I have in several videos talked about we each have an individual life plan that we create before we come into embodiment, if we're spiritual people. And that life plan will have what it is beneficial for you to do in terms of work and career. So what I'm saying is the best thing you can do is to use your intuition to tune in to your life plan. But as I've said in several videos, in order to really tune into it, you need to be neutral. And so you see what happens to many spiritual people is that we grow up being focused on the material side of life, which means we are not neutral because we are brought up to only listen to a materialist viewpoint. Now we find a spiritual teaching, now we flip into almost the opposite extreme, and again we are not neutral. If we are deciding with our outer minds, oh, I can't work in the system, I can't deal with the system, I see how artificial it is, you're blocking your intuition. You're blocking your attunement with your individual life plan. You simply can't tune into it because you have with your outer mind decided, oh, I can't be part of this. Now I'm not saying you should be part of it. I'm just saying, what does your individual life plan say? And do you know what it says? Or have you blocked that by making this decision with the outer mind? And this applies not only to work and career. I mean, I see it in myself. I see it in many other spiritual people, how we get so enthusiastic by finding the spiritual path or a spiritual movement or guru that we, as I've said before, we think the solution to all problems is to convert everybody to our specific spiritual movement. And that just isn't the case either. You know, a more balanced approach is to realize that what will actually change the world is certain universal spiritual ideas. And it's just not realistic to think that a majority of the people or a big part of the population will be converted to follow your particular guru or movement. It's just not realistic. I mean, it's completely naive, to be brutally honest. And I see it in myself. I was completely naive for the first 20 years or more. I was on the spiritual path. I mean, completely naive. I look back at it and I'm thinking, gosh, man, how could you believe that this was even realistic? So I see very well how we can, with our outer minds, block our intuition, block our attunement with our individual life plan. And that's what I hope I can help people avoid. And that's actually a theme in many of my videos, you know, it's not a matter of, you come to a point where you have no desire to tell other people what to do. And I came to that point a long time ago. And but what I do desire to see happen for people is that each person tunes into his or her life plan and follows that life plan. And I just have seen so many times how a very strongly held belief and attachment to a certain idea or belief can block you from doing this. Just one example is this: I can't work within the system. But how is the system going to be changed then? And is it potentially part of your life plan to help change the system? Yeah, it may not be, but you won't know until you tune in intuitively, and you can't tune in until you reach that neutral state of mind, as I'm saying.